係咪用呢個咪？早晨，聽到啊？早晨。
Good morning, colleagues. It's the appointed time, and we have already formed a quorum. So let's call to order the meeting of the Environment Affairs. First of all, information papers issued since the last meeting, none. Item 2 on the agenda, item for discussion at the next meeting. Please note that the next meeting will be held on the 26th of January. It's a Monday, as that would be after the release of the policy address. That's why we have added this agenda item. That's the policy briefing on the environmental initiatives in connection with the policy address 2015. And there are two other items which we have already scheduled for discussion earlier on. That is the provision of sewerage in Yuen Long and Port Shelter, and producer responsibility scheme on waste, electrical and electronic equipment. And as we have three items, and also for the first item on policy briefing on the policy address, that might take up more time. That's why I suggest that the meeting be advanced from 2:30 to 2 o'clock, and then the meeting will be extended by another half an hour. In other words, that will be from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. discussing three items. Any objection from members? If not, then please come back earlier, and the secretary will also remind you in due course. Item 3. Yes, item 3 on the agenda. Yes, one more point to remind members that at the last meeting, we were more than happy to have a public hearing on the environmental impact assessment on the third runway, and that's already been scheduled for the 6th of January. And please mark that down in your diary. And third item on the agenda, sludge treatment facilities. Let's invite the administration to join us first. So on item 3, we have Ms. Christine Low, Undersecretary for the Environment, Mr. Howard Chan, Deputy Director of Environmental Protection from the EPD, and Dr. Ellen Chan, Assistant Director from the EPD, and Mr. Davy Can, Principal Environmental Protection Officer, also from the EPD. So the four officials are here to answer members' questions. First, I'll invite the administration team to brief us on the paper, but just to remind members, if members have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest to declare under the item, please do so in accordance with Rule 83A by declaring that interest. So if there is any direct interest, then please do declare that interest in accordance with Rule 84 of the Rules of Procedure. First of all, I'll invite the administration team to walk us through the paper. Who is going to brief us? Mr. Howard Chan. Yes. With regard to the sludge treatment facilities, in June 2009, the Finance Committee of this Council approved the upgrading of the project, and we set aside some $416 million for price adjustment, and in accordance with the contract, we do have this trend rate of change in the prices of public sector building and construction output, because that's the price back in March 2009, but that we do allow for increase or price adjustment in accordance with inflation. And according to that projection, between 2009 and 2013, the increase would be 2% per annum, and then between 2014 and 2019, that should be 3%. But then looking at the actual situation since the commencement of works, there have been significant increase in labor wages and construction material prices. The actual price deflators for 2009 to 2013, it was at about 4.7%, and therefore, according to our latest estimates for price adjustments and also the cash flow projection, we expect that the actual price would go up from 423.6 million to $849.1 million. That's why we have already set out, set aside $117.6 million to offset that, but then we are still short of some $307.9 million in order to meet that shortfall, and therefore we are coming to this council to get the panel support before we go to the FC for this supplementary funding. Thank you. All right, in the first round, we have Kenneth Chan, Tony Chair, and then Christopher Chung. So 4 minutes each first. Kenneth, please. Thank you, Chairman. I have two questions. Number one, I'd like to put it to the administration with regard to the capacity of the facility in after its commissioning that will be able to deal with some 2,000 cubic tons of sludge. So what's the percentage of the total sludge volume? And also, have you set aside land for the facility to be further expanded? That's the first question. Second, well, according to Mr. Howard Chen just now, you said that because of the increase in labor wages and construction material prices, you also said that for the retail price, the average increase was 4.7%. Well, in fact, for the 4.7%, are you looking at labor wages for the construction sector, or are you just talking about the general price increase? Because you're getting an additional $300+ million. So are you expecting that what is the actual expected rate of increase every year? And also, is it because of construction material prices and also construction worker wages? So do you have a price index to indicate the extent of construction material price increases and also construction worker wages increase? So can you tell us exactly how much that has gone up during the past few years? I thought I was thinking that we were having an FC meeting. Well, on the price adjustment contingency, there were two indicators. Number one, workers' wages, and number two, construction material prices changes. And for the actual calculation, I understand that at the PWFC, the administration has already provided the breakdown. On this particular item, about 1/3 can be attributed to workers' wages. But of course, if you look at that, if you would like to get more comprehensive figures, I'll have to provide that after the meeting. And according to the administration's projection, during the past 5 years, the average increase was about 4.7% on average. I'd like to know exactly what is it all about. It is the combined increase of workers' wages and also construction material prices. So is it just confined to construction sector, or are you just talking about blue-collar workers' wages? So I think you will have to tell us exactly what that increase is. Can we ask the Assistant Director to answer the question? Well, I'll try to explain. For the workers' wages, well, we use a CEDD contract, and the overall wages, so it's CEDD projects. And also for construction materials, we have grids and also cement and also steels and also diesel and also the copper mains and so on. So these are the materials used in construction projects. And then for the workers' wages, actually they are referring to those working in the CEDD sector or civil engineering sector. And the cement, well, the facility should be able to deal with some 2,000 tons of sludge, but then we are not producing that much yet, so we will have to wait till about 2020 before we reach that volume. So even if we include heads too, then by 2012, well, we are just talking about some 1,300 to 1,500, and therefore we are more than able to deal with that. Tony Chair, concerning government contracts and also price adjustments, of course I do have some reservation about this, but then this is not the right forum for us to discuss this. This is a matter of principle, and I'd like the administration to clarify this. Well, in para 3 of the paper, you talk about the commissioning date, but then the Secretariat, if you look at the Secretariat's background paper in para 7, they also talk about the time, the expected date of commissioning. In fact, according to the Secretariat's paper, it should have commissioned in end of 2012. So apparently you're talking about 2015. Has there been a delay, and how come there has been such a substantial delay? And if there is a delay, then my personal view is that in terms of price adjustment, if there is a delay, who should be held responsible? And if the responsibility should rest with the contractor, because this is a DBO contract, and therefore, if there should be any adjustment, should you consider? If there is indeed a delay, would you be able to hand that over to the contractor, or should you have established who should be held responsible for the delay? And if there is a delay caused by the contractor, then there should be a penalty on the delay. And if the administration's fault, then of course that's another story. And also, you're talking about phase 2. Will there be further delay? And if there is another delay, then will there be another price adjustment, meaning that you will have to come for additional funding again? I think this is a rather complex project. In fact, when compared to the original commissioning date, there has been a delay, and there are two reasons. The first one is that during the tendering process, at the tendering stage, we encountered some problems, because when we looked at the bidding documents that we received, the price was somewhat higher, so that's by about $100 million. And in accordance with the central tendering process, we had to liaise with the bidder to see if the price could be adjusted downward, and we also have to seek legal advice in accordance with internal procedures before going back to the Central Tendering Committee, and there was a delay in this process, so that took us about 9 months to complete. And then in October 2010, we awarded the contract. But then subsequently, in the construction process, the contractor also encountered more technical problems than expected, and therefore there was another delay by about 12 months. So in this process, under the contract, we have already provided that if the contractor caused any delays, then we would have the right to seek claims from the contractor. That's been very clearly spelled out in the contract.
Just now the member asked you whether phase 2 will be affected. As for phase 2, we expect that it to be completed by 2017. However, the capacity now will be able to meet the present requirement. So for phase 2 is an extension. If there's small sludge in the future, then we were able to meet that capacity as well. Just now you told us that the tender was delayed, so that's why there has been a change in price. So the government should bear the responsibility. However, if it's the contractor that delayed the work, then should he be held responsible? Should the contractor be held responsible as well? We will try to recover all costs, but maybe Dr. Chen can supplement. I don't have a lot to supplement. Now, if the delay is the responsibility of the contractor, then of course we can ask him to compensate. Now, that's a price adjustment. Well, according to the contract, we have to pay him first. On the other hand, we can also claim him afterwards. Well, if that is the case, then the government is disadvantaged, because if it's the contractor's mistake, then the government still have to pay him. I think it's quite unfair. Although it's stated in the contract, I think this should definitely be followed up. Yes, we can discuss this at the development panel. Well, when I look at your paper, it seems that all the sludge problems have been resolved. And now you are not dumping sludge into the sea. But that's not the case. Ever since 1992, after some major infrastructural projects, now you are still dumping sludge near Donglong Island and Lantau Island. So what's the definition of sludge? It's just the sludge from the waste treatment plants. So according to your paper, it seems that all sludge problems have been resolved, but over the past 20 years, you have still been dumping sludge into the sea. So where does the sludge come from? According to your policy, you said that after 1996, you will stop dumping sludge into the sea. So how come it's still there? I'd like to thank Mr. Chung for his question. Now, with regard to the translation of sludge, actually, we are now talking about the sludge generated from waste treatment plants. It's called biosolid or sludge in English, and it's not sludge from excavation. The sludges from excavation might be polluted, so we are not treating it this way. I think in Chinese you should make it clearer. So in your paper, shouldn't you make this point clearer? Second, now you do not want to pollute our seas. So when will you stop dumping sludge into the sea? Chairman, as I explained just now, that kind of sludge is different from the sludge we are talking about just now. As for that issue, maybe it should be discussed at the CEED, and the CEDD can give you a reply. Deputy Director, well, for Mr. Chung's question, it's about filler in the sea. The Development Bureau can give us some information, and then we can explain further to members. That is about the present way of dealing with it. I'm not satisfied. Now, that is sludge, that is not filler. You are playing with words. Well, we want to improve the environment of Hong Kong, so you have to make things clear. In this paper, you talk about sludge, and people would think that is sludge from all areas. I think Mr. Chung wants us to make things clearer. That is, this sludge is from waste treatment plants. So in the future, there would not be such a confusion. So at the PWSC, when you submit the paper, please make things clearer. That is what kind of sludge you are talking about. So for the Environment Bureau, do they have a plan to stop dumping sludge into the sea? I think this has to be discussed with CEED. As for the other two officials, they have nothing to supplement. I think this issue should be referred to the CEED. I think it's the Environment Bureau's responsibility. Please give us a paper on this. Mr. Low Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. As for this project, and in 2009, there was an amount earmarked for it. You may well remember what happened in 2009. That was right after the financial tsunami. At that time, it was projected that the project prices in the coming years would not increase significantly because the economy was in a doldrum. So there will not be much inflation, including labor wages and construction material prices. Chairman, as far as I can remember, there's another project, and the LegCo has already approved an increase in the provision for price adjustment, and that's the Central Wan Chai bypass. The government explanation at that time was more or less the same. So this time around, I think this explanation is sort of reasonable. So this project is underway. As for phase 1, you say that it's almost completed, and then for phase 2, it will be completed very soon. So I think you should know very well what the exact prices are, because some parts of the projects have already been completed, and things are stated clearly in the project contracts. So for this additional provision, I hope you can tell me that you won't need to come back to us again to ask for more funds. Now it's increased to 5.4 billion, and it covers phases 1 and 2, right? W. Director, yes, we will control the expenditure stringently, and if there are no more unforeseeable circumstances, then we will not be coming back again for more funds. Mr. Low asked if 2 phases are covered. Yes. And this is a design, build, and operate contract. Well, during the contractual operation period, would the price change again? Or in the contract, you have already imposed some restrictions, that is, there will be no more increase in the future? As for the contract, it has an operation period of 15 years. Now, in the beginning of the operation period, there are price adjustment factors. We will follow the government's established rules of doing this. So that would be under your department's recurrent expenditure. How much is that? Roughly, every year is $220 million. That's the operating cost annually. Mr. Wu Chiwai. I have several questions, Chairman. The paper mentioned project contingencies. That's paragraph 8. So what is the drawdown situation like at present? Of course, I see the figures here. So is this the latest figure? Will there be more requests in the future? What do you think it would be like, and what kind of areas are they spending the money on? And for this sludge treatment facility, it has a capacity of 2,000 tons. However, the government told us just now that at the moment we do not need such a capacity. So after phase 1 and phase 2, there may be surplus capacity. So can the facility handle some other sludges, for example, those mentioned by Mr. Chung, so that the facility can operate in full and is not idling? And I have a last question. It is an incinerator. So can it turn waste into energy? And where will the energy go? And how can it benefit the public? I would like to answer the questions concerning contingencies. It's now 317 million, and 110 million has already been deployed from the project contingency to meet a higher than expected tender price. And if this application is approved by members, $117 million will be spent on the price adjustment. At the moment, this will not be used. Will be saving $200 million for the coming years. And if there are any needs, for example, well, after incineration, about 10% of the ashes would have to be put in landfill. Now we are cooperating with universities and trying to find out whether such ashes can be used as construction material so that they won't be put in to landfills anymore. As for claims, now if the contractors' claims are successful, then the compensation would not come from these contingency funds. The government has another fund to deal with that. However, for the administrative costs incurred, they will come from this contingency fund. Now we are discussing with the contractor. The contractor is making claims. And the government is also trying to make claims because the project is delayed. We are discussing with the Department of Justice, so at the moment I cannot tell you more details. So now you are studying with universities, trying to find out how the ashes can be used. Now, why will you be spending on contingency funds in this area? Definitely not. For this sludge treatment facility, we are trying our best to make use of the ashes produced. So this is within the project, and if an additional facility is needed, we will do that. How about turning waste into energy? Dr. Chen? Yes, now the facility will not handle 2,000 tons. We have 4 facilities. Each one of them will handle 500 tons. And we also need to have some reserve capacity. We do not have the capacity to handle extra things. For the design of the facility is designed for sludge from waste treatment plants, and its design is very different from incinerators. They are designed to treat objects of constant volumes. So now it only aims to handle sludge from waste treatment plants. When it reaches capacity of 2,000 tons, we expect that 2 megawatts energy can be generated, and that would be transmitted to our electricity grid. Now we are talking to the relevant authorities about this. So you will be making money from the electricity generated, and that will be public funds, right? Yes. Mr. Kwok. Now for this project, I'm sure it's very important for sludge treatment in Hong Kong. And because construction price has go up and now you need more funds, well, actually we see this all the time. But we are at such an early stage. Why are you already using contingency funds to offset some of the price increase?
Are you just trying to make things look better? So why do you have to get some $400 million as supplementary funding, and then for contingency some $117.6 million will be used to offset part of the increases, and then you're actually asking for an additional contingency of $307.9 million. So why are you not setting aside more contingency in order to deal with the expected inflation and also cost increase in the next 4 years? Because looking at para 6 of the paper, actually, according to your estimate, during the past 4 years, the price increase should have been at around 2% per annum, but now the actual price increase was at around 4.7%. So you're expecting that the price adjustment for the next few years should have been 3%, and now you're expecting that to increase by about 6%. So with about $200 million in the contingency, would that be enough? I'll answer part of that, and then I'll ask Dr. Chen to supplement. In fact, for the price deflator, the calculation was done by the Development Bureau by looking at labor wages and also construction material prices adjustments. And during the past 5 years, those figures were the actual figures, and then in the next 5 years, according to the current trend, they make the projection, and they are expecting that with the increase in labor wages and construction material prices, that would be adjusted upward by about 6% per annum. And then with the contingency in place, that should be able to cover what's going to happen in the next few years. And theoretically speaking, there would not be any need for the use of the contingency in the next few years. But then in terms of the use of money in our projects, we have to be very careful, and therefore, before we seek additional funding, we have already done an internal assessment concerning the works period in the next few years, and also the 15-year operation period, exactly how much would we need for the contingency, because if that has not been used, it will have to be returned to the Treasury. But then we will have to be careful, because that money will be frozen in the meantime if it's not used, and therefore we believe that $200 million should be enough. That's why we have made that decision. So it's not that we should not be using the contingency and then we should get the funding from the central authorities right away. I think that's not fair, because it's a question of making this decision. All right, you've estimated that the wages and also construction material prices would go up by some 4%. So can you have a breakdown? Dr. Chen, would you be able to come up with a breakdown? In fact, in para 6, we have already said that in 2009 is 3.1%, and then 2010, 2.9%, and then 2011, 5.9%, and then 2012, 6.8%, and 2013, 4.8%. I'm not asking about the year-by-year breakdown. I'm talking about the breakdown between labor wages and also construction material prices. So can you provide the information in the PwC paper, Mr. Albert Chen? Thank you, Chairman. This is a design, build, and operate contract. And according to my understanding in the past, if you have to use this kind of contract, that is a DBO contract, then basically you've already set down the framework in the contract, for example, inflation and so on, and then the bidder will have to take up the inflation risk. So I don't understand that under a DBO contract, how come the administration still has to take up the inflation responsibility? I don't understand that, because according to my own understanding, for many years, if you really go for a DBO contract, and if they would also be responsible for the operation, then the risk for inflation would go to the contractor, because under this model or under this approach, the administration would not be responsible for inflation. And now, how come you're covering inflation for them? And also, in terms of incineration, you're able to save some $600 million. So, if you can refer to enclosure 3, I don't know if I've got it correct. All right, if you look at the incineration facility, when compared to the approved estimates, all right, item 1, you overestimated that by $700 million, and then there was an underestimation by some $600 million in the second part. So I don't quite understand. How come there is such a big gap in your estimates? Can you explain to us the detailed reasons? And I hope that you can also provide us with a supplementary information paper. How come the estimates can be such a far cry from the actual cost? Well, can you answer the question? Yes, I'll try to answer the question on the DBO contract. In fact, in our bidding process, we also follow the government's procedures. So the bidder will have to come up with a fixed price contract, but then in the contract we would also say that there would be this price adjustment factor, because the contractor would also have to know that during the next 15 years of operation there would need to be some price adjustment, and there is no chance that they would be able to make this estimate right from day one. So can you also confirm if that's the same arrangement for the Chiang Mai Bridge and other infrastructure projects? So whether or not there has been any change in the principles or approach by the administration, we also need to know. Yes, Dr. Chen. Well, with regard to the price gap, in fact, for every item, we did our best in coming up with the estimates. And of course, when the contractors really bid for the contract, they have their own strategies, or for example, if they know that for the incineration system that could be somewhat cheaper, then they would be making an offer which is somewhat lower. But then for the civil and site formation works, they would come up with a bigger estimate. But then in the end, we also have to look at the overall cost. So if you look at the final cost, it's not too much different from our original estimate. But then you're supposed to be the professionals. You're talking about a difference of some $700 million, and then in another case you're talking about a gap of some $600 million. So can you tell us how come there was this big gap? Were there any sudden changes in the market resulting in this big gap? You will have to give us a reasonable explanation. All right, Dr. Chen apparently suggests that sometimes you might overestimate, and in other areas you might be underestimating. Well, this is a professional issue. You're not just going to the grocery store to buy some daily groceries. So can you explain to us why there has been this big gap? Yes, we can provide you with more detailed information later, but then when we did the estimate, that was done in 2008 and 2009. We conducted the market survey, and then we looked at different items and how much they would cost. But then when it comes to the actual award of contract, which is a DBO contract, the contractor might also look at their own expertise and also their own portfolio and experience and so on and so forth. And then when they came up with their estimate, they would be able to come up with something different. All right, Mr. Chen, your time's up. You will have to give them a chance to answer. Because the gap is too wide, you will have to explain to us. All right, if this is a board, if you're the board of a big company, you would have been fired right away. Yes, we can provide the detailed information after the meeting. Yes, Mr. Frankie Yik. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on an issue which is somewhat different, which is the same as what Mr. Chen just asked, because I was also responsible for building or doing some contract, for example, the Western Harbour Crossing. I don't know how that could be done. All right, you have this new term. You call that a design, build, and operate contract. This is a DBO contract. Is it that? Well, I'd like to know whether or not the Development Bureau, maybe the Secretary can check it out for us. So would that be the approach for in the future? So for BOT, all right, the contractor will have to take up all the risks. So how come there would be this price adjustment afterwards? I don't understand it. Or else on other occasions we will have to discuss it again, because this might not have to do with this bureau. It's about the entire tendering process. Thank you. Yes, Under Secretary. Well, for DBO contract, it's indeed somewhat different. Sorry, speakers not coming through. I believe that the questions that members have asked today have to do with the definition of the contract and how the government goes about this sort of contract. So in making or doing projections and estimates, if members are interested, we can discuss that. Well, Under Secretary, you will have to go to the PWSC anyway, so when you go to the PWSC, please ask the CEDD colleagues to come along to explain the situation to members. I think members might have more questions on that, so they will have to answer that question. Any further questions? Second round, Mr. Wu Chi Wai, 2 minutes. Sorry, Mr. Stephen Ho. Sorry, speaker, stop. With regard to Sludge at Sea, can we discuss that again at the future EA panel meetings? Because we also have to discuss the way to go for with regard to the processing of sludge in the future. Because as far as I understand it, after the current pit has been used up or filled, the administration has no alternative pits to store the sludge at sea. Yes, Wu Chi-wei, second round, 2 minutes. Yes, I'd like to follow up on the contingency. Some $200 million will be set aside for the possibility of using the ash. I don't quite get it. Because if in the original design you have not allowed for the use of ash, then the design is in itself problematic. But then if you're saying that, well, sorry, in the original design it's not planned for, but then you're going to modify the contract so that there can be this additional item, and then some improvements can be made with regard to the use of ash, then $200 million is not a small sum. In fact, that's tantamount to a new project, but then we are trying to do that by way of using the contingency, and then it will be used up in a new project. So I think that's problematic. I hope that you can clarify that. And secondly, all right, in the original contract, if you have not got that item, and then once it's a DBO contract, according to my understanding, very often the contractor would ask for an exorbitant price for that. So you would be at their mercy. So can you tell us why you're using this contingency for this particular item? Deputy Director, I cited the use of ash as an example. That's just an example, because in the future, if there are items that will have to be carried out under this project, then we can use the contingency money to do that. So that's just one of the examples. Sorry, Chairman, can I clarify this? All right, the contingency should be about that project. You should not be doing that for something new. You should not have used it for something that is not covered in the initial contract. Well, you will have to look at para 2 of the paper. Item C, provision of environmental education and associated facilities. So with regard to the study on the use of ash, could that be covered under that item? So in constructing this sludge treatment facility, has that been planned for? Well, let me cite an example. For example, if there are some environmental improvement measures, if we are able to enhance the environmental protection facilities within the facility, then in the original contract, if it's not provided for, and if we want to further improve the environment to meet the latest environmental requirements, then we can also use the contingency to do that. But then Mr. Wu was asking, all right, if it's not provided for in the original contract, and then if all of a sudden you try to add that procedurally, would that be a problem? Can you comment on that? Who is to answer that question? Assistant Director. Yes, to answer Mr. Wu's question, we have started a new item on this sludge treatment facility, and if we were to increase that, and if it has to do with this sludge treatment facility, then as Mr. Wu said, if it's about the processing or use of ash, then procedurally we cannot jump the gun. We cannot do that under the head. So we have to have a separate item. We can only do that under a separate item. And precisely, we don't want the administration or a department to do this in a fragmented manner. That's why we have to use the contingency under the original project in order to do it. That's the requirement of the procedure. But then you have not answered my question. All right, once we start an item, we will have to make it clear as to what is to be covered. But then you are setting aside this contingency and you're trying to cater for some new items. So how can that be the same thing?
Well, of course, you're not satisfied. Well, can the government explain to me further? I think they'll give you an answer after the meeting. Mr. Chairway Chen, I would like to follow up on this and the PWSC meeting. I want more details. If a project is delayed and if it's the responsibility of the contractor, what would the price adjustment be? Even if the price has increased, the government has must pay, or what? And second, now there is a delay, and for phase 2, when I look at the past papers, that it is 2009 paper. It is said that it can be commissioned in 2016, and now there will be further delay. Is that so? Now, because for phase 1, it should have been completed by 2012, and now it's delayed to 2015. As for sludge treatment and the sludge, you said that it comes from the waste treatment plants, and originally you aimed to have a capacity of 800, and then it's increased to 1,500, and by 2020 it will be 2,000. There has been some adjustments because for the HAS project it has been delayed, so now we will be handling about 900 tons for and then when it's 2015 it will be increased to 1,300 tons. As for the project delay, the government would pay for the price adjustment, but as for claiming for compensation, there is another mechanism in place, and the government can claim the contractor, but that's afterwards. Price adjustment is another issue. How about the commissioning of the phase 2? Now we expect that the commencement date can be 2015 or even earlier, because the project is quite simple, and now we are nearing the final period of phase 2. Okay, members have asked all their questions, and I suggest that this paper be submitted to the PWSC. Any objection? No? So let's wrap up the discussion of this item, and now we move on to item 4, implementation of the extension of the plastic shopping bag charging to all retail outlets. We have some government officials with us today. Ms. Christine Low, Under Secretary, Mr. Howard Chen, Deputy Director, Mr. David Wong, Assistant Director, Mr. Samson Lai, Assistant Director. Can the administration first take us through the paper? And then I'll ask members to raise questions. Under Secretary, Mr. Wong will be giving you a more detailed explanation, but for today's paper, our discussion will be focused on paragraph 8 and onwards. As for this project, I'm sure members are very familiar with this. We have been to LegCo many times at the Bills Committee meetings. We have talked a lot in details, and now we are going to implement the extension of the plastic shopping bag charging scheme, PSB charging. So we will tell members more details concerning the implementation. Mr. Wong. Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the paper, as the Undersecretary pointed out, at the moment, now we are preparing for the implementation of the extension of the PSB charging, which will take effect on the 1st of April 2015. In the background of the paper, you can see that now for this extension program, under the law, all the retail outlets, regardless of their nature or scale, if they hand out PSB, they will have to charge 50 cents. In phase 1 of the PSB charging, there were 3,500 retail outlets. Now it will be increased to 10,000. So for all the retail outlets, when they sell goods, and if they are to distribute PSB, they have to charge the customers, and that cannot be less than 50 cents. And they cannot offer discounts or rebate to offset the charge. Now, because this has to be implemented across the territory, and some SMEs or smaller retail outlets may not know too clearly about this arrangement. So at the end of March, we passed this piece of legislation, and from then onwards, we have started our promotion programs and facilitation efforts. And I would like to tell members what we've done in the past few months. As for the industries, we have come into contact with most of the retail associations. As of October, we have staged over 30 briefing sessions. We have talked to over 60 such associations. We explain to them about the requirements under the law, and we give them advices as to what they should pay attention to. And in Annex A, you can see the relevant details. And we understand that some of the retail operators may not be members of retail or trade associations. So we have also contacted district councils. In the past few months, we have conducted briefing sessions at different districts so that we can brief the local retail outlets on this. In the coming few months, until the 1st of April, we will continue with this work, and we will step up our efforts. As for promotion, detailed information can be found on our dedicated website. At every briefing session, we would distribute materials like this. Here are some stickers and 10 cards. These are very important for the retail outlets because after the 1st of April, we hope that the shops can display this at the shop fronts. They have to tell the customers that PSBs are to be charged, and if they do not charge the customers for PSBs, then there will be a financial penalty. So the stickers and 10 cards can help. Other than telling the customers, the shopkeepers can display such stickholders and 10 cards at shop fronts and cashier counters so that both staff and customers would have a clearer picture. And now we also have a dedicated headline which would handle inquiries from the trade and the general public. The telephone number is 315-22299. And this number has also been printed on our publicity materials. In the coming few months, at the district council level, we will be conducting a number of activities so that the message can be disseminated to local shops. As for retail industry, we have talked to property management companies and chain store operators. We have asked them to help us promote the policy at the shopping malls, department stores, etc. And we have also engaged trained contract personnel to be stationed at major retail hotspots to help explain the PSB charging requirements to customers and provide support to retailers. In the coming few months, we will be doing more publicity on media, and these are detailed in the papers. I'm not going into the relevant details. As for enforcement, you can see our plan under paragraph 13. After the 1st of April, we would conduct random checks and mystery shopping at retail outlets of different districts. Our enforcement officers will act as mystery shoppers, And if we receive complaints from the public, we will follow up investigations to the reports. Now, under the law, if we have enough evidence that a retailer does not abide by the rule, we will impose a fixed penalty. And if there are still problems, we'll consider prosecution through the issue of summons. We have a number of members who would like to ask their first round questions. So first of all, Mr. Albert Chen. Well, Chairman, I have a comment. I think many of the government officials are human audio recorders. They have been repeating the same message. I object to this new PSB charging scheme because I think it is just a show. I think you should have other policies, for example, sorting waste at source, etc. Then you should also have a number of measures in place to reduce waste. You can't say that today I'll be imposing levy on shopping bags and tomorrow I'll be imposing levy on glass bottles, etc. So you can't change all the time. So for the design and implementation of this scheme, I think is totally unconvincible. And for the use of PSB, I think the culprit is actually newsstands, but you are not doing anything this time around. So I think for the design of the whole scheme is just a whitewashing thing, and you are not doing any actual things. Well, also you are now deterring people from using PSB, but the government hasn't done anything itself. The government is using numerous PSBs. We have waste sorting bins at different districts, and to use huge black plastic bags to collect those wastes. And when the government's cuts trees and branches, grasses on the roadside, you also use big black plastic bags to hold the branches and the leaves. I was driving from the NT last week and I saw numerous plastic bags like this along the roadside.
And you're actually spending some or using some 10 million plus plastic bags, not including the contractors using that. So that might include the AFCD and other departments. So you should have come up with a policy in overseas countries. In fact, for greening, they don't use such plastic bags. They would use biodegradable plastic bags instead of using those big black plastic bags, because the environmental damage would mean that the administration is the chief culprit. All right, you've been very relaxed about yourselves, but then you've been very stringent on the others. So in terms of the implementation of this policy, I think this policy should not be supported, and therefore I will just oppose it till the end. Would you like the administration to respond to that? No, I don't think they would be able to respond to that. If you put it to Ms. Christine Low, as soon as she assumed office, or I already told her, but then what has she done about this? How do you regulate the use of plastic bags among government departments? So I'll give you a chance to explain it. So would you like to respond? I don't think I need to respond. Well, I'm asking you if you've done anything about it with regard to the regulation of the use of plastic bags by the government. How can you say that you need not answer? Have you done anything about it at all since you assumed office? So, Mr. Chen, so have you done anything to reduce the use of plastic bags by the administration? Yes, Mr. Albert Chen was right. He did exchange views with me on a few occasions, and also on the issue of the principle. He has also repeated that, and the administration has noted that. Well, So why bother to be the undersecretary? Why don't you just go back to be to run your think tank? Well, Chairman, I've also participated in the Bills Committee's work. That's why I'm quite clear about the scrutiny process, and I think we all want to do a better job. But then there are also controversial issues, in particular the different opinions are raised in the business sector. But I think we all try to do a better job, and whatever can be done should be done. And then the new measure will be implemented on the 1st of April 2015. So there is only about 3.5 months to go. So do you have to step up publicity? So have we done enough in terms of publicity? And also looking at the issue of enforcement, just now the assistant director said that they've approached the major chambers of commerce, and they've also talked to the trade unions and so on. But then I'm concerned that there might be some sole proprietorship small shops and so on. They might not be aware of that. So in the coming months, would you be more relaxed about that, or would you just be issuing warnings to them? For example, in Taiwan, when they try to catch the litter bugs, all right, if you're a visitor, they would just be issuing a warning if you are a first-time offender. So would you be adopting a similar approach in this case, so that everybody will have a chance to learn about this instead of just punishing them when they are caught right away? And also, have you done any estimate with the implementation of this plan? What are the expected effects? Who would like to respond to that? Mr. Wong? Yes, thank you for the question. On the issue of law enforcement, let me supplement on a few points. Yes, we fully understand and agree that for the small operators, through the chambers of commerce, we might not be able to reach out to them, and therefore we will adopt a two-pronged approach. That is, in the coming few months, in individual district will be approaching the district councils, and then through them we would also be going into their communities to reach out to these small shop operators, hoping that I will be able to reach out to the small retail outlets in the districts. And also through our contractual arrangements, we would be hiring some companies to help us do the publicity in the district, and that would also include distributing leaflets and so on. That would not be confined to the shopping centers. That would be done in the street level. We would be reaching out to the small shops and so on. So how many people will be doing that? How many contract staff will you be hiring for that purpose? Well, we will be doing that in several contracts, and our target is to reach out to some 20,000-30,000 small shops. And of course, there are many chain stores throughout the territory. But then, according to our estimate, under this contractual arrangement, if we are able to reach out to the small shops in the district, we hope to be able to reach out to some 20,000-30,000 such small shops. And you also talk about stepping up publicity in the next few months. In fact, we will also be doing more media publicity. For example, we'll put up APIs and posters. So those will be done in the next few months. And in Para 12, we have set out the details. Next, Mr. Frankie Yik. Yes, thank you. Well, the Liberal Party does not support spending money to resolve a problem. So that would give people an impression that so long as I've paid, I've already done my duty, and there is no need for me to change my lifestyle and habits. But then on this occasion, the administration has implemented this plastic levy scheme, and as a result, for some existing operators, they might be reducing the use of plastic bags, but now they have the non-woven bags, the so-called green bags, so to speak. And in fact, in my office, I have quite a number of them, and at home, I also have a number of them. And according to my understanding, if you look at the non-woven bags, in fact, if you look at the biodegradability, that would be even worse than the plastic bags. So, according to your estimate, after the implementation of the full scheme, with regard to the use of non-woven bags, would that be more prevalent, and as a result, the difficulty would be even bigger? What measures do you have to tackle this problem? And also, on the 7th of December, there is this report in the Sing Pao Daily. And then for public housing estates, well, they have sent out a lot of plastic rubbish bags. And then they would be giving some 24 on average to every household, and the amount would be very substantial. And the second problem is that it's too thin, and therefore it can break very easily. I've been to some housing estates and so on, and they've also worked around that, and in the end they had to resort to some more durable ones. And then of course for the housing estates, they might be resorting to the thinner bags, but then in the end if the garbage leaks out from the bag, then they have no way but to resort to more sturdy ones. Well, for non-woven bags, on this occasion, during our publicity campaign, that would be one of the highlights, because many people would think that it's environmental friendly materials, but then it's not. And therefore, if operators are sending out non-woven bags, they would also have to charge 50 cents from the customer, so that everybody would understand the environmental meaning, so that they would have to bring their own shopping bags. That's a message that we are trying to send out. And then on the plastic bags, well, when we discuss the issue of waste charging, well, we understand that for estate management offices of many housing estates, they do send out such bags. But then with regard to the use of plastic waste bags, that might not have a direct bearing on the waste charging scheme, but then the direction is to charge waste on the basis of the number of bags that the household has. And therefore, in the design of the garbage bags, we will be noting this situation, and we will try to identify an appropriate type which is good for use by the households. Well, for public housing estates, will those bags be biodegradable? So can that be used? Well, for biodegradability, well, according to our view, when these bags are sent out to the landfills, when they are dumped into the landfills, well, when it comes to biodegradability, that would only be confined to certain conditions. For example, there will have to be certain degree of sunlight, and therefore when they are disposed of at the landfills, that biodegradability will not work at all, and therefore we will have to be very careful about our publicity. All right, I've heard your answer. All right, for non-woven bags, they will also have to be charged, and also when there is waste charging, that would also resolve the problem, so that the households will have to pay for the bags that they get, and of course they will have to consider whether or not they will have to be bought or distributed for free. But then is the bag going to create further problems, or else you're actually creating more refuse than resolving the problems? Yes, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Yes, Chairman, some colleagues hold opposing views to the scheme, but then I think, to be more pragmatic, if you look at phase 1 of the plastic shopping bag charging scheme, I think the scheme has been successful, because if you look at the levy that has been charged, that has been much lower than the original estimate of the administration. It shows that the administration didn't really go up for the levy. They are just trying to change people's shopping habits. And if you go to the retail outlet, very few people would be getting the plastic shopping bag from the supermarket or the operator. They would bring their own bags. But then for the non-woven bags, when we were small, when we went to the wet market, our mums would always bring with them this basket to contain or to carry the grocery items. And also, when we were young, we would also go out with a cloth bag in order to carry the items that we might purchase. So that would be recyclable, because if you clean it up, if you wash it, you can use it again. That's why I think that using a cloth bag would be even better. So I think the administration would really have to think out of the box in coming up with some more measures, because sometimes you resolve a problem, but then at the same time you're generating another problem. You will have to step up publicity in order to publicize this, so that people would only be using environmentally friendly bags. For example, you can use bags made of cloth, like what we were used to when we were small. We can use that for many years, and would that be really more environmentally friendly? And also, I was also a member of the Bills Committee to scrutinize the plastic shopping bag levy, and in fact the administration was willing to take on board good advice. For example, for food which is frozen and chilled, for hygiene reasons, the bags would be exempted from the levy. But then whether you are a member of the public or a small shop operator, how can you get hold of a message so that you'll be able to distinguish between what you will have to carry in plastic shopping bags and what can be exempted from the levy? Yes, you said that you had done a lot of publicity, you've been to all the district councils, but then I think there is something that leaves to be desired, because it's a very complex issue. And thirdly, the operators are not required to pay the administration in return. I think that's wise, because if they have to pay the levy to the administration and they will have to do a lot of registration and so on, then to the SMEs that would be quite a burden. And now you will be simplifying the procedure, and I think that's good. But then, since the administration has promised that at the start of the program there would be this voluntary declaration system, and under the current situation with regard to this voluntary declaration, what would the SMEs be doing in order to tie in with the administration's efforts? Who is going to answer this question? Mr. Wong? On the voluntary declaration arrangement, in fact, in our briefings to the trade associations and so on, we've been emphasizing this, and some follow-up action has been taken. And recently we've also approached the retail association, because earlier on they agreed that in the future they would do the coordinating role when the scheme is to be implemented, so that for the retail operators participating in the scheme, they would try to collect the data from them. We are still liaising with them, and at the start of the scheme we would be talking about the specific arrangements. For example, for the data that they've collected, how can we collate them, and then they could also be submitted to us. In fact, that would have to be implemented on the 1st of April, because after phase 1, on the 1st of April, that would be phase 2. So this is a new arrangement, and therefore the liaison is going on. And also in terms of publicity by them, they would also encourage more retailers, in particular their members, to join the scheme of declaration. Mr. James Toh.
Okay.
Chairman, I'll be asking about some trivial and technical things. If you cannot give me an answer right now, you can give me an answer later in writing. Now, if a customer hasn't bought anything and he just buys a plastic bag, and the shopkeeper charges the customer 20 cents, has he violated the rule? Okay, the customer hasn't bought anything, but he just buys a plastic bag. What will happen? And for that shop, well, it's because that plastic bag can serve as a publicity for the shop. Then the shopkeeper has an oral agreement with the customer. He would ask the customer to take the plastic bag out of his shop, and by doing so, the customer would get 20 cents. So would that be a breach of the law? And you also know a number of labor unions they run co-ops, and they also sell things. This is a welfare for their members. So when members go into such shops, so it's like the example I cited just now, because these are co-op shops. So can they give the plastic bags to these member customers? Well, I'm sorry I'm asking such technical questions, and I'm sure not many shops would do this, but I'm asking them anyway because I don't want people to be caught accidentally by the law, and some people may find it unfair if you cast the net too wide. There are several scenarios. First, if you sell the plastic bag as a commodity at the supermarkets now, there's still a charge. So if you sell a bag, you have to charge. So originally it should be 50 cents or more. I mean that the customer hasn't bought anything yet. He just goes into a shop and buy a plastic bag. So the plastic bag would be regarded as a commodity. So he cannot charge 20 cents. He has to charge 50 cents unless the price of the plastic bag is more than $5. So you are restricting or stipulating the prices of plastic bags. How about giving it out as a gift? No, that's not allowed. Under the new law, well, actually, when we drafted this piece of legislation, we have taken different factors into account. For phase one, supermarkets and the other 3,000 odd chain or large retail outlets, we already did this. And now when a retailer sells provides a plastic bag to a customers in relation to the sale of goods, and the relevant activities will be prohibited. We have looked into all the possible loopholes. As for co-ops, now what if I give him 20 cents? Who give whom? The shop give 20 cents to the customer because the customer helps in the publicity. Now, if the shop hires temporary publicity personnel, that would be a different issue. However, if a plastic bag is given to the customer and if that is related to the sale of goods, then it's regulated. So all these activities are regulated. There will not be a loophole. Mr. Toh, for your concern, well, all these scenarios have been discussed in great details at the Bills Committee. Well, how about member service at co-ops? For example, the PTU, FTU, etc. They have members, and if the members ask for a plastic bag, you are saying that the plastic bag cannot be given. Well, for the last scenario Mr. Toh depicted is more complicated. What I was talking just now was about the giving of plastic bags, which is related to the sale of goods. And of course, if it's too complicated, then we will have to look at the relevant evidences. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong. Well, I was a member of the Bills Committee. However, I still have a lot of questions concerning the bill. During the scrutiny of the bill, I also put forward a lot of constructive advices, but the government didn't take them on board. Now, the new piece of legislation will take effect on the 1st of April 2015. I query about the effectiveness of this piece of legislation. Now, for PSB charging, the most effective way of doing it is to do it at the importation point. That is, during customs clearance. I think that would be a more thorough way of doing it. So it's just like bonded goods. And secondly, maybe you should have an office like that of the Tobacco Control Office, so that you can go inspect the retail outlets. And if you do that, what is the cost and how effective will it be? I don't think it's cost effective at all. And thirdly, SMEs and micro enterprises will find it a headache to implement this scheme. Because many of these shops are just doing Gaifeng business. They know their customers, and if their customers ask for a plastic bag and they refuse to give it out, that would harm their relationship. And now the PSB charge is not going to the public coffers. The shopkeeper can pocket it. And now the law requires the shop operators to impose this charge. So this may harm the relationship between the small shops and their neighbor. Moreover, I think now the scheme is effective, but if you are extending it, the present effects may be undermined. Because under the present law, the shops which charge the PSB fees will have to give that amount of money to the government. But in the future, the shops don't have to do this. So I think this is a retrogression, and the government is giving up on this policy. So my question is, for the next step, will the government consider this? Actually, during the scrutiny of the bill, I put forward a lot of views. And I hope that the government would look into my views. That is, the tax will be charged at the importation points. And there are many shops that are selling plastic bags. If you go to such shops, you can see all sorts of plastic bags. They even have all sizes of medicine plastic bags. So what will happen to these shops? Who's going to answer this question? Under Secretary, as for the first question, well, this is a new law. And this time around is quite comprehensive. I think after a year or two, we will be reviewing the effect. I don't think it's appropriate to promise you anything now. So after the implementation, we will look at the results. Now, maybe Hong Kong people will be encouraged to change their behavior, and more of them will be bringing their own bags. So now I cannot give you any undertaking. Mr. Lai? For the last question, well, for the shops or the suppliers that are selling plastic bags, what will happen to them? For a package of 10 plastic bags, it will not be regarded as a PSB. Now, this is the biggest loophole. So for a small quantity, if it's just 1 or 2 bags, then it's a breach of the law. If I buy a lot over 10 bags, then it's not taxable. What kind of policy is that? Are you not giving a lot of trouble to the people? Do you think this is environmental protection? We already had stage 1. We have seen a good result. So why can't you take a bolder step? Well, for phase 1 and phase 2 of the environmental levy scheme on PSB, now for phase 2, you have adopted a retention approach. Now for big retailers, they have a capability, they can do the administrative works, and now in phase 2 you do not ask them to do the relevant administration. So in the future we'll not be able to monitor them because we do not know the quantity. So you now doing away with this very effective measure. And we also want people to reduce waste at source. I think the business sector should also bear the responsibility. So why big retailers are not required to do this? You may say that this is not a level playing field, but I don't think that is sound. And now you are saying the fine would be $2,000. But I think the penalty should be deterrent enough so that it can become an incentive to change their behavior. So I think SMEs should also bear the administrative burden and compliance cost. This will be conducive to the extension of the PSB charging. By doing so, you can make the scheme more complete. So other than fixed penalty, maybe you should consider other penalties. Yes, we want to achieve the goals the member mentioned. This is our major concern today because this is going to be implemented soon. So now we have to do a lot of publicity and we target the SMEs. Now we are now focusing on that areas. After the implementation, of course, there will be inspections. We will try to find out loopholes. Our team will be focusing on these areas. So inspection is also a very important link. Do you have enough manpower, time, and resources? Because in the initial stage, you would have to implement this vigorously so that SMEs would comply with the law. So how can you convince the LegCo and the public that you have enough manpower and resources? Maybe Mr. Wong can supplement later.
So Mr. Wong can tell you more about the arrangements of his team. And of course, we have tens of thousands of shop operators that we'd like to reach out to. And of course, you might say that definitely your team would be short of staff. But then if you look at it this way, that is, if our targets would be fixed and we would also be doing APIs, so that the message can be sent out through different media. And of course, even if you have done your job, still there are bound to be people who would not be able to get it. So for those details, I'll defer to Mr. Wong. Yes, on enforcement arrangements, as I just said briefly, in the course of implementation, in particular in the next few months, before and after the 1st of April, we would be doing the following. First, at the major retail outlets, through contractual arrangements, we will be hiring some staff to do the publicity and explanation work so that we will answer the questions raised by potential customers and the shop operators, and would be focusing on the retail hotspots like shopping centers and department stores where more people would be doing shopping. And on small SMEs in the next few months, again, we would be doing this by way of a contractual arrangement, and therefore some extra staff would be hired to distribute some publicity materials and stickers and leaflets so that they would be given to the or handed out to the retail operators. We are targeting some 30,000 retail operators. Those would not be in major shopping centers. We would be going to the standalone shops on the streets and so on. And then on the 1st of April, when it comes to full implementation of the program, the EPD would also arrange for random checks to be conducted by the staff of the EPD. And as we want people to comply with the law rather than to catch them for non-compliance, therefore there would also be another contract. And through these contractors, we would be conducting inspection at the districts so that when people come out from these shops, will they be carrying shopping bags and so on, and then we will try to monitor their flow chart and so on, so that for the enforcement agencies, they would be conducting analysis of such cases, and if they find something problematic, they would conduct investigation. And then on the part of the habits of the customers, that's also very important. We understand that some customers and members of the public are very enthusiastic about this, and if they see that some shops are not doing this properly, they would also file complaints with us, and therefore at the hotline, we would also be collecting such details when we deal with complaints. And then the enforcement agencies would also inform of the results and findings, and they would look at the situation and also deployment of manpower in conducting inspection. I believe that overall speaking, with the stepped up publicity and also our efforts to reach out to the retail operators, and also we would also be conducting a systemic inspection and also a complaint mechanism in implementing the extended PSB charging scheme. The impact should be positive. So upon receipt of complaint, what are you going to do? Well, as I said, we would definitely be following up on that, and as soon as the EPD receives a complaint, we would conduct an investigation into the case. And as I said, the information would be very useful. For example, if we notice that a spot is doing a particular thing, then upon the receipt of such complaints, we would also plan our spot checks accordingly. But then that would be done by the customers or chambers of commerce. Well, complaints from both sources would be available. Yes, Mr. Vincent Fang. Thank you, Chairman. Concerning this bill, from the very beginning till the end, Bureau Director, I've made it clear that I'm against it. Well, I oppose it not because the trade is not environmentally friendly. In fact, during the first round, what I heard from the administration was that they managed to reduce the number of bags used, and they also managed to get additional revenue from the levy. So, to what extent have you been able to reduce the use of plastic bags, and has that trend continued? And also, with the full implementation of the scheme, what's the target? So, in terms of the number of plastic shopping bags used, what further target do you aim to achieve? Well, I said that I was against this. That's because you're actually imposing a levy in order to ban it. Of course, there are alternative ways to do it without the levy. So are there any other measures in place for you to do this? Well, when I scrutinize this, both myself and Mr. Wong Ting Kwong have asked a number of questions. Well, sometimes if we have to use those plastic shopping bags because of hygiene concerns, then why is it that the administration has never resorted to biodegradable plastic bags? I understand that this was done in other countries. So why have you not done that? And also for the environmental shopping bags, has the administration done anything about it? And we also suggested at the scrutiny process for plastic shopping bags used in supermarkets. In fact, these bags have not been wasted at all. They can always use it as garbage bags, and then they would also dispose it properly. So this procedure is necessary. We have not wasted such plastic bags at all. And then with the implementation of the program, I've put it to the administration on repeated occasions. So have you done any calculation in terms of the black plastic garbage bags? Those are very big ones. They are very thick. So have you done any calculation as to whether the use has gone up? Because according to some importers, in terms of the number of imports, that has not been reduced at all. In fact, that has gone up. So in terms of these figures, does the administration have these figures? And also, have you done any statistics with regard to the proposed scheme? What is your target? To what extent would you like to reduce the use? Because it might seem very fair, because from the beginning you targeted some 2,000 big chain stores, and then for the rest they were not required to pay the levy. But then if you target the SMEs or even the micro enterprises, that would be very difficult to implement, and that would also give rise to a lot of grievances. And then it's like the smoke cessation office. Well, to what extent has it been effective in enforcing the law? I do have a big question mark. I don't want you to repeat the same mistake of the smoking control office. All right, we tried to install a smoking room in the bars and also the mahjong parlors and so on, but then the administration did not agree to that. And now you're seeing many people smoking on the street, and that's not really a very nice scene. And therefore, I don't want the plastic shopping bag to become a repeat of the smoking ban. So I like to focus on the figures. So to what extent have you been able to reduce the use, and also has there been any increase in the use of big plastic black garbage bags? Yes, we understand that Mr. Vincent Fang and a number of other members have reservation about this plastic shopping bag levy. But then at the Bills Committee, I understand that there has been a lot of discussions already. So, Mr. Lai, yes, at the Bills Committee, we did discuss the issue, and we have some figures. So we'll try to collate the information and provide that to the panel. And also on the use of plastic bags, for one reason or another, we might not have had those figures. And also on the reduction target, in the first stage, we believe that we have managed to reduce the use of plastic bags at supermarkets and also some 3,000 retailers, and we managed to reduce that by some 90%. And every year we also conduct a survey at the landfills to find out how many plastic bags have been dumped there. And we have also reported that to the panel. Yes, there has been a slight increase. I think that's in line with the practice in other countries, so we will continue to step up publicity. With regard to the expanded scheme, which will be implemented next year, all right, there are many exemption clauses under the law which has to do with food hygiene and so on. And we noticed that for the remaining bags, most of them will be used for those purposes. As to whether or not the rate of reduction would be the same when it comes to full implementation, we do not have that high hope. But then we can see that many people are of the view that when they go to the supermarket, well, I think many of them have already formed the habit of bringing their own shopping bags. Why is it that they are not doing the same when they patronize other shops? That's why we try to extend that to other retail outlets, and that's the purpose of the law. All right, I'd like to use my 4 minutes to ask two simple questions. Well, what I've seen is that in terms of publicity and promotion, well, I think you've done a remarkable job when it comes to the local community. I think that's been done through chambers of commerce and so on. But then at the tourist spots, you can see that many visitors or tourists would be carrying different shopping bags and so on. So would you be targeting the inbound tourists, for example, at the airport or at the border checkpoints of the road links or rail links? I have not noticed that you have done similar publicity on incoming or inbound tourists. If you're able to do that, then that would also help reduce the use of plastic shopping bags by visitors and tourists, and that would also avoid unnecessary conflict, because they might not understand our law very well, and they might not understand why they have to pay an extra 50% or 50 cents for a plastic shopping bag. And also, can you update us on the information? All right, at stage 1, for the 2,000 retail operators which have to charge the 50-cent levy, and then they will have to submit it to the administration. And then for the other SMEs, they would not require to do the same. But then before this, they would have to make this pledge to the administration. That is, the revenue will be used for certain purposes. So with regard to that pledge, have they been able to honor that pledge, or what plans do they have in place to make good use of that levy? Mr. Wong? Thank you. On the first comment on tourists and visitors, yes, that's part of our publicity campaign, but then as the chairman just said, we will have to go back and talk to the relevant stakeholders to see if we can step up that publicity. I believe that that's important, because as the chairman just said, well, for the visitors and tourists, if they know that, then that would also facilitate the work of the operators. And on the second point, well, after the expansion of the scheme, they do not have to submit the levy to the administration, and at the Bills Committee, they said that the revenue from the levy would be used for environmental protection or for greening and so on. In this respect, I've talked to the trade associations. I've particularly reminded them of this, and I understand that for the retail association, they've already taken the initiative or taken the lead in promoting amongst their members that they should consider adopting specific arrangements to use the levy revenue for environmental protection and other uses. And during the past few months, we have also talked to some green groups and I understand that they've also got some plans in place to organize some environmentally friendly or environmental protection activities. We have contacted the Retail Association, and we would arrange for some matching discussions so that they would come up with some specific plans for implementation, so that other retail operators could also participate. So next time when you come back again to the panel to explain to us the PSB scheme, can you supplement on the details? For example, when the levy is not required to be submitted to the administration, what would it be used for? Next round, Kwok Wai Keung and Gary Fan, 2 minutes each. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, Chairman. Just now I asked this, but then I haven't got the formal reply yet. All right, during the initial period of implementation, would you be able to issue warnings first before prosecuting them? In particular, when it comes to the SMEs, can you answer this question briefly? Second, I haven't heard this mentioned before. All right, we have the law enforcement agencies. How do we distinguish or tell that they are law enforcement agencies? Well, of course, when they try to do undercover operations, of course, we will not be able to tell. But then when they actually try to enforce the law, then people will have to be able to tell if they were enforcement agencies, because we are concerned that people might be cheated. Some people might pose themselves as law enforcement agencies and so on. So they will have to come up with proper identification tools before they can enforce the law. Yes, in terms of issuing warning before prosecution, well, on the 1st of April, well, this levy scheme will have to be implemented. That's why, under the law, there is no authorization for the law enforcement agents to issue warnings before actually enforcing or prosecuting the offender. And of course, during the next few months, in our publicity efforts, we will particularly remind the operators that, in particular, the SMEs will have to be reminded of this.
And how to identify our law enforcement agents. Well, the government will adhere to its usual practice. We will have an identification card or warrant card for the officer. I think the content of the card would have to made public. Yes, we would have a unified way of doing it when it comes to government agents. Mr. Gary Fang, Chairman, I have 3 questions. First is a follow-up on my previous question. Now, in the future, if some SMEs or some large retail outlets, they will be given this, they will adhere by a retention approach. So in the future, if anyone wants to report on the shops, they will be the customers. Why is that? And second, in the second phase, you are saying that the quantity of imported PSBs has not changed. Do you have the figures? Please give them to us. Thirdly, the chairman has eventually found his conscience. You are concerned about the individual visitors from the mainland. You are saying that these mainland people may not be familiar with the PSB charging, so that's why they are using a lot of PSBs. So what will the government do in the future? Now you are changing the consuming behavior of Hong Kong people, yet there are many mainland visitors every day. So can you also do something in that area? And also, can you give us the relevant figures, or can you even have some more focused policy or measures concerning the mainlanders? Maybe later on, Mr. Wong can supplement. With regard to visitors and the waste they create in Hong Kong, and how can we quantify it? Well, that's not easy. Well, because they are mixed with Hong Kong people, they go to the same places. But some of the green groups have done such a survey. I don't know how accurate that is. Now, we plan to impose a charge according to quantity. The government has never conducted any survey in this regard. In the future, I'm sure we'll have more accurate figures. You haven't done anything in the past. Why don't you let her answer the question, Mr. Fan? Your time is up. Now, this is important because in the future we will be discussing this. That is what to do. And for shopping malls, in the past, they didn't have an incentive to do such a survey, but in the future they would have to know, and so they would look at the amount of waste and the cost of handling such waste, etc. Then we will have a clearer picture. We will have more statistics for discussion, and at that time we can ask this question, that is, how much do you think of this is related to tourists? So you haven't done the roughest estimate. 20 million, 5 million. You haven't done anything concerning the visitors, Mr. Vincent Fan. Chairman, I would ask 2 simpler questions. Now you're going to implement this, and you are focusing on retail outlets. The wholesalers are exempted. But for some wholesalers, they would also do some retail business on the side. So would the PSBs be exempted? And when I scrutinized the bill, I also mentioned this. I am in the garment industry, and for each piece of garments is wrapped in a plastic bag. The government told me that it's exempted. But how about the dry cleaners? Some of the clothes, many of their clothes are packaged in plastic bags. So will they also be exempted? There are a lot of gray areas. There are so many scenarios that the government must have omitted some. So In the future, I hope you can give us more information, because by implementing it, we'll get to know more and more, and then you would let us know what is exempted, what is not. Well, we are targeting retail outlets. Well, for wholesalers who are doing retail business on the side, and the business part will be regulated. As for a dry cleaning service, is a service, so it's not a retail outlet. It's not covered by this piece of legislation. Mr. Vincent Fang cited a lot of examples during the scrutiny. We have answered all those questions. So we adopt a common sense approach, and now we are targeting retail, and we are not covering the service industry. When the industries ask us questions, we'll update our Q&A or FAQ from time to time. Well, for many of these retail outlets, they are micro enterprises. They may not be too sure about this scheme. So I hope that in the future there won't be many conflicts. Let us wrap up the discussion of this item. Agenda item 5. Now, you may remember that we paid a duty visit to the UK, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Sweden to study this country's experience on thermal waste treatment facilities. Now we have a report, and it will be submitted to the House Committee on the 19th of December. I hope members will note this. No comments? Agenda item 6. Any other business? No other business. Let's adjourn the meeting now. Thank you.